The purposes of the grant was to foster justice, wellness, and inclusion. And so what we wanted to do was focus on including the Celtic community in that body of work. And so it was a way for us to collaborate with members of the session who had, inspired us and taught us all these great tunes over the years. The full production at the Spot on Kirk, when we presented to an audience, there were 7 people on stage. So it was Burt Mitchell on the Celtic flute.
And you have Brandon Davis.
Brandon Davis on the uilleann pipes. Tim Sauls on the banjo and bouzouki.
Paul Brockman on the fiddle.
And Dennis McCam on guitar.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And most of those guys came back to record on this album with us for Star Up the Mountain.
And we know all of them from the traditional Irish session here in Roanoke. We just kind of bring all of our instruments together and drink beer for 3 hours and play tunes.
It's a great time.
And the Irish session in Roanoke, it was 10 years old when I joined, so it's probably closer to 15 at this point, closer to 20.
Yeah, it's like a form of living history, because you're sharing these traditional tunes, and some of them are newer compositions, but the style and a lot of the tunes are very traditional. And so you can have someone come from Ireland or from Australia, or even from Japan, and that know the same kinds of tunes, and 2 people who've never met together can sit and actually play music together right then and there.
And that happens at our session. People pass through and there's just a new person there for one night, and we're like, "Oh man, are you coming back next week?" And they said, "Nope, I'm on my way to Oklahoma." Okay, see you next time. You can find a session in most towns. So you go, there's this ancient website called thesession.org. It has like 20-year-old forum post on it. It's crazy.
Nice. Yeah, so, internet ancient.
I know, internet ancient.
By getting these different guest musicians coming in at different weeks, you get a completely different sound, different instrumentation, and things like that. So you never know what you're going to get.
Okay, we took 3 weeks to Ireland. We took our instruments with us, and we managed to find 22 sessions in the 21 days that we were there.
We learned so much. Each region has its own specific style of playing. So, it's a small island, but there are just a ton of different styles and traditions that live on to this day. And you could spend a year, in each of these different regions just studying that particular way of doing things. You could spend a lifetime.
You were seeing Celtic music before. Will you go into what that term means?
Yeah, when we use the term Celtic music, it's a wider term. It's more of an umbrella term.
Gotcha.
Because Irish music would be the music of Ireland, Scottish music comes from Scotland, but when you say Celtic, it can be any of those. It could be a mixture. It could be American music.
Okay.
Yeah, kind of coming from that heritage. There are 7 Celtic nations, so there's a bit of it in France, a little bit in Spain.
It's a little contentious about the Galician region of Spain. Some people count that as a Celtic nation, others don't. But historically, there definitely is Celtic influence there. So we like to include it because, we want to pull inspiration from every place we can.
Yeah.
So you're kind of incorporating all of those Celtic styles as well as original styles. Do you take like Appalachian specific influence as well from that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. There's a very strong old-time community here as well. And what's really neat about it is, so we have our Irish session that meets on Monday night at Big Lick, but at Golden Cactus right across the street on Wednesday night, there's an old-time jam.
Yeah.
And there are tunes that are played at each session it's the same tune, but it's done in a totally different style. And you see very much there's a lineage and a connection there. So you have a bunch of Irish and Scottish immigrants coming over, settling along the Appalachians, especially in the Highlands. And then you see a very American style that emerges out of those Celtic roots.
Irish music is already very rhythmic, so when you're playing the Bower, you pick up on the rhythms that already exist in the session, and so how the people around you are swinging their 8th notes and things like that, that's absolutely in how I play. You will frequently just start playing a tune and I have to follow along with you on the stage. You get very good at
very good at
reading your partner's facial expressions. You have a certain way you go when you're going to change tune.
Is Celtic music improvisational by nature?
There's a core spirit of a tune, like it when you hear it, but there's what are called settings. It's slight variations within the tune, and how people choose to do the settings, or if they choose to put in variations within that while still keeping the core of the melody, is a big part of the musicianship that goes into it.
And maybe if you've never been to a session, if you don't know this kind of music, you think, oh, there's only so many ways you can play a melody. No, it's crazy. Like,
Sure.
2 different people can completely change up how something is played. Again, they'll swing their eighth notes a different way, which makes me, the drummer, play a different way, and the accompanist is going to do something different.
Uh-huh.
And because of all of the different instruments that happen to be at the table, you get a completely different texture. It's fascinating.
That ripple effect.
There's a lot of themes in Celtic music are very place-based.
Mhm.
You know, wish I was back in Carrickfergus or something like that, or going back to Donegal. So we're looking a lot at both the geographic features of Roanoke. There's actually a track in Star Above the Mountain that is sung in Scots Gaelic, at least to the best of my ability, and when you translate it back into English, the first half of it is focusing on the geographic features of this area. So old Gabriel looks at, the railroad culture around here and the whistle, which is called Old Gabriel, that used to sound downtown. So this is one of the octave mandolins that I play. I call this one the Mammoth. It was made by a fellow named Woody McKenzie. It's a great Celtic and old-time fiddler around here, left-handed fiddler too. I call it the Mammoth because this piece up here is called the Nut, and it's made out of mammoth bone. I don't know how he's able to get his hands on that, but it gives it a really neat sound, and he built this entire instrument. And it's all local wood from the Roanoke area. There's 2 different ways of doing this. So an octave mandolin has the exact same tuning as a bluegrass mandolin, G, D, A, D. Same as a fiddle as well. And for melody players like me, that's pretty familiar territory. The other option is to take this E string and tune it down a whole step to a D, and then you get this open GDAD tuning. It's really good for chording and accompaniment.
This is called a bowran. I'll spell it for you because it is not spelled as it sounds. Bodhran. It is an Irish hand drum, different from drums you see because I only have one stick. But that doesn't mean that the other hand is idle. I'm pressing on the skin from the back of this drum. It's a deceptively simple instrument that you can get a lot of different kinds of sounds out of.
How does playing percussion relate to your writing background?
Oh, she uses the same hand for the tipper that she writes with.
That's true. We're told to hold the tipper like a pencil. One day it rained for like 5 days in a row, and the Roanoke River just couldn't take it, and it flooded. And I went on a walk, and I was like, this is fascinating, because it was covering the trees, and it was touching the bottom of the Walnut Bridge, things like that. Yeah, so I came home, and I wrote a ditty about that. And as I mentioned earlier, it fit really well with this tune that we play at our session called Gwindal, right. Which we're pretty sure is not played commonly anywhere else. It's just because one of our session members really loved it in the 80s and taught it to everybody in Roanoke.
Yeah, it's a tune from the Brittany region of France.
Who is the session player who taught it to everyone?
Bert Mitchell.
Okay, cool.
He taught bagpipes at VMI, retired recently.
Also one of the best bagpipers on the East Coast, too.
Wow.
Yeah.
We have 2 traditional tunes. Everything else was original except for...
Well, this one is original.
It's original.
We just didn't write it.
Right, it was written by a friend of ours who passed away in 2020.
His name was Terry Wetmore. He played this drum way better than me. He's the closest thing that I had to a mentor. And he was writing a lot of songs toward the end of his life, and he was playing them at our session. And he sang this particular song quite often, and we liked it. And he was working on putting it together with some of the guys who played on our album, but he unfortunately passed away before he could do anything with it. So we got permission from his wife to record it and put it on this album because it's about the Crozet Tunnel. It's about this region, so it seemed appropriate for multiple reasons.
Yeah, and I wish the definitive recording had been him singing it and not me. But I'm just glad that it can exist in some form or fashion because it's a great song. It's about the guys who carved out the Crozet Tunnel, which you can actually go visit if you drive out to Crozet. The tunnel is open to the public. It's like a public park, and it's like this mile-long, just straight tunnel through solid rock, and it's kind of amazing what they're able to accomplish.
But a lot of people died while doing it.
Yeah.
That's why it's called the Ghost of Crozet Tunnel.